Welcome to CosmoFactory, a podcast by Cosmoprof Worldwide Bologna, where we explore the entire cosmetics, personal care, and fragrance industry supply chain. I'm your host, Deanna Utrusky, and here at CosmoFactory, we look beyond the trends to discover the ideas, initiatives, and innovations that are truly advancing beauty. Let's get started. This episode is about sustainable development in the cosmetics sector. It's about the practical realities and the impacts of regulations. It's about the sustainability claims, or maybe the sustainability adjacent claims that resonate with beauty consumers. It's about the pros and cons of certifications, and it's about the environmental sustainability trends we can expect to see in the years ahead. With me now in the CosmoFactory podcast recording booth at Cosmoprof Worldwide Bologna is Iveta Kovacova, Research Director at Ecovia Intelligence. Iveta, welcome to CosmoFactory.
Hi, Dina. Hi. Thank you very much. Thank you for your warm welcome, and it's exciting to be here. It's the first time for me on a podcast, actually.
That's fantastic. No, I'm so pleased for the chance to speak with you. Now, when I say the phrase sustainable development in the cosmetics sector, what are the key practices or issues that come to mind for you? What does sustainable development in the cosmetics sector mean at Ecovia Intelligence?
Mm-hmm. So for us at Ecovia, what it means, it's actually incorporating sustainability in all aspects of the cosmetics products production process. So this can be anything ranging from ethical sourcing, traceability and transparency of ingredients, green production processes, formulation of products, sustainable packaging solutions, and also end of life of cosmetics products. So, of course, there are no sort of easy answers or solutions to any of these, and it's always exciting to kind of observe how individual companies tackle these areas. But from what we've observed at Ecovia, sustainability or sustainable development in cosmetics is more or less mainstream at this point. And whereas in the past it was mainly the dark green players pushing these issues, now we see large multinational cosmetics companies actually setting bold targets and incorporating sustainability at the forefront of the agenda.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I would guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, but even when Ecovia got started, Organic Monitor,
yeah, we were very niche.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yes. Like, you were catering to a very niche market. It was, I don't want to say it was wishful thinking, was it? but it was, go ahead.
Well, yes, no, our founder, Amarjit Sahota, he sometimes tells me this story, how he started, and he went to the first trade show, and when he was trying to get some clients, and people were basically laughing at him, so, and yeah, it's really impressive to see how far the industry has gone. It's not just about organic or even fair trade anymore. Sustainability is such a nuanced topic now. It's such a multifaceted topic, and it's very exciting to observe the developments in the industry.
Yeah, no, I love it. So listeners already know that I personally really enjoy ingredient science and ingredient innovation, and there are many considerations that impact new ingredient adoption. And I'm sure I'm not alone, though, in my assessment that regulations are one of the biggest drivers of new ingredient adoption that we see. You shared with me in a previous conversation that regulations are similarly perhaps the primary driver of environmental sustainability initiatives in the cosmetics and personal care industry. Can you share more about what you have observed there?
Sure. So, yes. So, whereas traditionally in the past, as I said, so these topics tend to be or used to be pushed by these small sort of grassroots movements. Whereas now what we see more kind of initiative from the top-down approach, mainly at the EU level, and it's quite unique. Actually, we don't see this necessarily anywhere else in the world. For example, in the U.S., the biggest consumer market in the world, we don't see this or expect this to happen in the near future at all. But really, the EU and some of the EU directives and regulations are really pushing the needle when it comes to, let's say, tackling greenwashing or standardizing sustainability reporting, or improving packaging best practices.
No, and as you suggested, there are several regulatory changes affecting the European Union in particular. And I would say by extension then any beauty maker that's aiming for global compliance across their product portfolio. Can you talk us through in a bit more specifics some of the recent and forthcoming sustainability regulations?
Sure. So, as you said, there are several that are being prepared or came into force in the last couple of months or years. So one of them is the Green Claims Directive, which will significantly affect the area of green and environmental claims that companies can make, cosmetics companies as well. So this directive actually aims to tackle greenwashing and provide transparency in this space, because all green or environmental claims they would have to be substantiated properly.
And can you share a little bit about what substantiation might look like, or do we not know yet?
Companies would either have to use sort of third-party verified logos, which have developed standards as to what's allowed, how to use claims, and why to use specific claims. Or they would have to back up their claims by specific data, so solid data. There's an example of offsetting where companies can no longer make sort of climate-friendly claims unless they truly are trying to reduce the carbon footprint. Another example is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which actually aims to kind of set sort of robust rules as to pertaining to the information and the social environmental information that companies must report on. And we'll also introduce like a standardized methodology on sustainability reporting, which will eventually help investors to kind of decide what kind of industry or company they want to invest in. So, and another example is the EU packaging and packaging waste regulation. This regulation aims to reduce the amount of waste produced in the EU, and also kind of foster or shift more towards a circularity approach in packaging as well.
Interesting, yeah. And the first regulation that you spoke of really focused on claims. Can you share an example of a literal claim maybe that is being made and might continue being made, but then now needs, like you're suggesting, concrete substantiation? What are sustainability claims? I mean, there's a lot of language that floats around, but when is it a claim? What is a claim? Help me think about that a little bit.
So just a simple claim of, for example, claiming that your product is natural, or climate friendly or good for the planet. So what does it actually mean in terms of any kind of data that you can provide that you're doing it? So the easiest ways how to substantiate your claims is to go for third-party voluntary schemes, but you cannot always do that. So if you cannot properly substantiate that your product is good for the planet, then you cannot simply use this claim.
Wow. This will be a fun challenge for the marketing team.
Yes.
So let's move beyond the supply chain into the beauty retail space a bit. Some brands will say quite plainly that sustainability does not sell. What has your research turned up? Are there product claims that do resonate with consumers?
Well, from our research, what we found is that yes, educated consumers look for labels and standards, and they want to buy products that are verified. However, there's a huge problem with proliferation of labels. Obviously, the Green Claims Directive will address a majority of this, but it's still happening in other parts of the world, and which leads to consumer confusion. But yes, some brands actually don't choose this route, and they kind of build a whole ethos of their brand around sustainability. So instead of using logos and labels, they invest in communities. They establish sourcing projects, and that's the way they decided to go, and it works for them. I mean, there's several success stories, definitely. But interesting what you said. Even some of the dark green companies, they still say that at the end of the day, consumers want products that work. So the efficacy is really, really important. So that should be at the forefront, even if you have a dark green brand. So yes, the efficacy of your product is very important for consumers.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You've mentioned sustainability schemes, or in the States we often say certifications. But let's talk about that a bit. It sounds like these might be quite useful, more so maybe even going forward for industry suppliers, for brands, and for consumers. But can you say more about that? How are they practical for each of those groups, maybe?
So yes, as I said, consumers, educated consumers especially, they look for labels. I think, according to our research, one of the main reasons why consumers opt for sustainable options is our health impacts, actually. So they want to avoid, let's say, contentious ingredients or petroleum-based ingredients. So in this sense, brands can actually cater to this kind of consumers as well, and they can use it, leverage it for their advantage. So at the end of the day, brands and third-party verification schemes actually add credibility, and they create trust among consumers.
Mm-hmm. No, that's helpful to hear, and it certainly makes sense. If suppliers and brands are trying to decide what sustainability certifications, if any, to invest in, which is always a big decision, and I do hear a lot about often the financial piece of the investment, as well as, of course, the actual on-the-ground sustainability work. But when I'm talking, especially with suppliers, a lot of times the concern is that financial investment. Are there schemes or certifications that you particularly recommend? And if you can't do that, I'm curious, maybe there are guidelines you could suggest that a company might want to follow if they're trying to get to the right decision for their business, I guess I should say. Yeah.
So as I already mentioned, so one of the primary drivers of consumers choosing sustainable or natural and organic personal care products are health impact. So because consumers primarily want to avoid petroleum-based ingredients, so the labels that pertain to formulation of the products tend to work very well.
Okay.
So through Cosmos, let's say USDA in the US. So I would say these are quite important. And then what we've seen is also a growing vegan trend in cosmetics. Cosmetic companies actually account for majority of licensees at the Vegan Society. So it's definitely a growing trend, and because the plant-based, the vegan lifestyle is becoming popular, so consumers want that in the cosmetics as well. Other examples include any kind of labels and schemes that pertain to the social aspect of sustainability. I think that's been growing in importance as well. So any kind of fair trade, fair for life labels or fair wild labels, they can also work. And also there are other examples. So for example, when cosmetics companies, they want to focus more at transitioning towards more circular approach. So the cradle to cradle label is also also an option. So yeah, there are many options. I wouldn't say there are some kind of specific guidelines. It really depends on how companies want to actually position their brand, and they need to decide sort of what works for them, what kind of consumers they want to target, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe the follow-up question I have for you kind of gets at that, thinking about your brand's consumers in particular. But you mentioned vegan, which has, certainly been, I would say, off and on emerging in our industry for a while. And one of the things I certainly saw suppliers and brands latch onto in terms of vegan is the latitude it gives for synthetic inputs. Instead of simply making natural claims, right? Vegan really opens it up, but is as you've suggested, with applications with the Vegan Society, right? It's well defined, and there's a consumer group who has that as their identity. But there are also, and I am reluctant to use this expression. But I am hearing people use the expression anti-vegan, and I've even written some pieces about ingredients that could be described as anti-vegan, right? But are, for the brands or the suppliers offering those ingredients, they feel like more natural inputs, right? They might be animal byproducts, which are being upcycled, or insect ingredients, derived insect oils or other insect-derived ingredients, proteins and that sort of thing. Can you say anything about sort of the back and forth there in the vegan, not so vegan?
Yes, so it is a very complex issue,
yes.
I would say. Just because a product is vegan doesn't necessarily mean that it's natural. So it's where the confusion may happen, for consumers, that they think they are maybe buying something, but it's not really what they're buying. But it really depends on the kind of how deep and how far brands can actually go in this. So there's no really one size fits all approach to this. The vegan example is just one of them, where lots of ingredients that are allowed in vegan certified products can be seen as relatively harmful or petroleum based, and lots of the natural or organic brands, they would never even consider using such ingredients, and they tend to use, let's say, animal based ingredients.
There are plenty of animal ingredients. I just want to interject. Things like lanolin, right? That are, wouldn't even be considered waste, but that you can source from animal.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I mean, I've come across some amazing lanolin projects, regenerative agriculture. They do amazing things. But yes, the vegan, you cannot make the vegan claims, and some consumers may reject it. So yeah, it's really a bit of a controversial and intricate topic. So yeah.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, we've made it quite clear there are regulator reporting deadlines and looming deadlines, even for UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the regulations in the UK, as you've pointed to. With these in mind, and along with everything else you're seeing, from your research and your clients, can you tell me what environmental sustainability trends we might expect in the cosmetics industry, for the next few years or so?
Yes, so I personally think sustainability will become even more mainstream, so it will become like an integral part of how companies actually operate, and it will be ingrained in their whole ethos. In terms of trends, one of the examples, let's say, from the food industry, it's a shift from, let's say, no longer focusing on just reducing impacts, but focusing on creating positive impact. So how can we create a product while, let's say, creating positive value? One of the examples is the regenerative organic standard, where products and raw materials actually certified when they are grown organically using regenerative practices, and they are regenerating soil. And one of the trailblazers is actually the American company Dr. Bronner's. They are one of the founding members of the Regenerative Organic Alliance, and they actually developed the ROC standard themselves. They make regenerative claims on some of their products as well. So I think this will be definitely a shift we will see.
How sizable is that movement right now?
It's not very sizable, but what we observed, it's some of the established standards in the cosmetics industry, or are kind of collaborating or reaching out to ROC and establishing collaboration.
Yeah.
So, for example, ICEA and Cosmos as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when I first started to hear about regenerative beauty, it had very much two lanes. One was, as you're describing, right, regenerative agriculture, regenerative practices that support the soil, support the planet, give back, right, reparative, right, for some of the environmental damage that industry may have created, humanity may have created. And then there's regenerative skincare, right? There's all this fantastic ingredient science that's helping us regenerate. And I feel like regenerative skincare owns the word regenerative. Are you hearing any other language about regenerative ag or regenerative in terms of sustainability?
So I think, again, as these regenerative claims, they can also get a bit messy because, yes, we have the ROC standard, which is regenerative organic.
Okay.
But we also have several other standards that are regenerative, okay? But they're not necessarily organic. There's a huge issue around greenwashing. There's a huge issue around the practices they use. So yeah, but I personally think if the cosmetics industry is able to set like a proper definition and continue collaborating with the Regenerative Organic Alliance in this, I think they're in the right direction.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And other trends, I cut you off. Were there other trends you wanted to share?
Sure. Other trends, I think what we will see also increased investment in R&D, new actives, as well as using sustainable feedstock, such as seaweeds to produce cosmetics ingredients, application of biotechnology, stem cell technology, precision fermentation, as well as more shift towards circularity and circular economy. I think one of the examples is use of upcycled ingredients in cosmetics products. This trend has been gaining traction in this space, and several sort of flavor and fragrances houses already have upcycled ingredients ranges that they supply, so it's quite exciting to see. And also, I think personal care companies will have to address the issue of conscious consumption, in my opinion, because from some of the studies that I've seen, more than 2/3 of carbon footprint of a cosmetic product is actually on the side of a consumer. And this is an issue, in my opinion, that will have to be addressed in the future. The way consumers actually use cosmetics products, how much of cosmetics products they use, and the way they dispose of them. I think this will have to be addressed eventually.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. Iveta, this was a very telling conversation. I really appreciate your being a guest on the CosmoFactory podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Dina. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you find the CosmoFactory podcast useful, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and share your thoughts so even more cosmetic industry professionals can discover the CosmoFactory. I'm Deanna Utrusky. Please join me again next Tuesday for a new episode of the CosmoFactory podcast.